Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, if you would, at twitter.com/UNCKnowledge. Twitter.com/UNCKnowledge. Comment, ask questions, suggest guests. A fellow at the Hoover Institution, Dr. Thomas Sowell has taught economics, intellectual history, and social policy at such institutions as Cornell, Amherst, and UCLA. The author of more than a dozen books, Dr. Sowell has just published a collection of essays, Dismantling America. Tom, welcome.
Good to be here.
Segment 1, Decline and Fall. From Dismantling America, quote, "The collapse of a civilization is not just the replacement of rulers or institutions with new rulers and new institutions. It is the destruction of a whole way of life and the painful and sometimes pathetic attempts of rebuilding amid the ruins."
Wow.
Is that where America is headed? I believe it is. Close quote.
Wow.
Now, whatever troubles we have, it's still the richest, most powerful nation in the world. We're still fundamentally at peace. Some soldiers in Iraq, some soldiers in Afghanistan, some in Germany, some in South Korea, but relatively small wars by historical standards in Afghanistan and Iraq. How can you say such a thing?
Well, you know, that description would also have fit the United States on December 6, 1941. So it's like the argument that was used when I used to question whether Social Security was fiscally sound. And I said, Social Security has never missed a payment. It's never been a day late or a dollar short. I said, it's always true right up to the moment of collapse.
Again,
Wow.
from Dismantling America. While the Obama administration is not the root cause of the ominous dangers that face this country at home and abroad, it is the embodiment, the personification, and the culmination of dangerous trends that began decades ago.
You know, a lot of people had issues with the type of president that President Barack Obama was. And the only thing I paid attention to, and I hate to say this, was that there was a black family in the White House. Protect them at all costs. I don't care what they put out. I think everything else that comes out is going to be, and I got to get this book too, because I have read Black Rednecks and White Liberals. I have that book, and I have a few others. Thanks to you all, Intellectuals in Society. I have that as well. But yeah, so but I'm learning a whole lot right now that kind of makes me feel bad, because I was in great support for the first black president. But the more I hear from Thomas Sowell, it's like, dude, you should have probably been the first black president. But let me go ahead and keep it going.
How does the President of the United States embody dangerous trends? How do you see this man?
Oh my gosh. I see him as someone who all his life has been associated with and part of a group of people who fundamentally don't believe in the principles of this country. Not only people, the most obvious example, obviously, is Jeremiah Wright. People like Bill Ayers, whom he's tried to disavow.
Oh, that was his
but people
pastor,
who
Jeremiah
fundamentally
Wright.
think that we're on the wrong track, we have the wrong principles, and we need to be changed, whether we want to be or not.
Tom, you mentioned Jeremiah Wright, his pastor at church in Chicago. You mentioned Bill Ayers, who was a former member of
the Weather Underground.
The Weather Underground, exactly. What about his formation, his intellectual formation at Columbia, Harvard Law School?
Well, as he himself says, he always sought out the most radical people. He worked as a community organizer. I don't think most people stop and think, what does a community organizer do? He doesn't organize a community.
It's not bake sales.
Huh?
It's not bake sales he's organizing.
No, he's not telling people in the community how to shop better and stuff like that. He is mobilizing all the resentments, organizing them in order to put them into a battle to get what they want from other people.
Wow.
Now, you talk about Barack Obama as embodying dangerous trends, quote, that began decades ago.
Oh, yes.
When? This is during your lifetime, during your adult lifetime?
Yes, and perhaps even a little earlier. But I think what you see in the most clearly, I think, in the academic world, are people who don't think that this country is a great country. One example of a colleague of mine who teaches at Harvard, after 9/11, put an American flag on his car. And his colleagues said, "What is that for?" When I visited Berkeley in the aftermath of 9/11, when there were flags everywhere, I did not see one flag on the Berkeley campus on any of those expensive houses. You know, when I was coming back from Berkeley, the first American flag I saw was in a low-income black neighborhood in Oakland. These are people who consider themselves citizens of the world, and that the rest of us are so lucky to have them here to change America, so that people like us don't have a voice. And of course, the whole way that Obama has operated with these enormous bills that no one has ever had time to read, that they rush through, where they're putting people in power who don't have to go through the confirmation process, so that we don't find out what they're like except by if there's an expose on Fox News or someplace. I mean, his whole thing has been to circumvent the American public in order to put in things that they clearly don't want, as shown by the polls, as shown by this recent repudiation in Missouri.
All right, that's a question.
So basically, he's adding more things to to make it more confusing in order for the United States to be governed properly. He's not really adding anything that's a solution or is answering any questions or solving any problems that we've had before. All right.
Barack Obama won by about 7 percentage points. That's the biggest for a Democratic presidential candidate. Bill Clinton won by 8. FDR won by big. But that's he's in the top 3 Democratic finishers in the last 7 decades. Barack Obama is. So here's the question. You've described him, you've described the academic elites. To what extent the American people voted for him?
Yes.
To what extent do you see a corrosion of values among the American people themselves on the one hand? On the other hand, to what extent is there just a kind of creeping takeover by an elite that fails to share, that is opposed to the values that most Americans share?
There's both things. And I think part of the reason so many people voted for him was that what they got through the media was so filtered that they poo-pooed this man having been a member of a church run by a ranting racist because they wanted to believe that he was going to be a unifier. Community organizers don't unify. They divide, they polarize. That's how they get what they want. I never thought of Acorn as a unifying force in American life. And this man is not. But of course, if they don't know that, then of course they may vote for him.
So it's the press, it's Barack Obama and the administration, it's the elites at academic institutions.
But it's not just a thing that happened now. Long before Barack Obama's name became known, there was this attitude, essentially repudiating the principles of the country. I mean, it started, I think, with Woodrow Wilson, who was the first president of the United States to openly say that the Constitution, needed to be superseded. And he didn't mean that there needed to be amendments to the Constitution, which anybody can be for, but that the courts should do this. In other words, to circumvent the voting public, and put in the things that the judges think ought to be put in, irrespective of what the Constitution says.
Segment 2, Dismantling America. 2 quotations. The first comes from your book, Dismantling America.
I like the way this guy does interviews with Dr. Thomas Sowell, because he is extremely knowledgeable of every single part. Well, first of all, he's showing great respect to Dr. Sowell's books, how much Dr. Sowell had to study and put into those books, those novels, everything that he's writing. He's like, and we're going to discuss this entire thing. I think that's absolutely brilliant, because then before I even go to read the book, I already have a great understanding of what I'm going to find. And then when I'm reading it and it's just working itself out for me, or organically, I'm starting to remember things that I've learned through the conversation that he's having with this gentleman. So yeah, this definitely helps people like me who are looking to gain some knowledge on not only politics, but different policies and ideas from great people such as Thomas Sowell.
This segment is on marriage. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, you write, said that the life of the law has not been logic but experience. Vast numbers of laws have accumulated and evolved over the centuries based on experience with male, female unions. There is no reason why all those laws should be transferred willy-nilly to a different kind of union, one with neither the inherent tendency to produce children or the inherent
Wow.
asymmetries of relationships between people of different sexes.
Wow.
That's quotation 1. Here's quotation 2. U.S. District Judge Vaughn Walker, ruling in Perry versus Schwarzenegger on August 4th. Quote, gender no longer forms an essential part of marriage. Close quote. I just dropped that in your lap to see what you do with it, Dr. Sowell.
Wow.
Well, the most important decision is always who makes the decision. And so the question is not what is the role of gender for this judge to decide, but since we are presumably still, for the moment at least, a self-governing nation, it's for the voting public to decide. And so the fact that he feels that way, that's wonderful. Let him vote that way in the privacy of the voting booth. But let him not say that this is now the law of the land just because he happens to think that way.
Thomas Sowell is fearless. He's fearless. He gave a dang on about getting canceled or any of that. He was like, man, look, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, period. Just because you want to call it marriage does not mean that all the things that a married couple of today get, you should get those things, irregardless of your sex, your gender, your whatever it is. He's a G, man. He's actually like more gangster than people give him credit. Like the way that he presents himself is like, look, it's not that I don't care, but if you want to try me on this, then feel free. We can have a discussion. I mean, these books wasn't written, without thought. These books was written with great research and years and years and years of experience. This guy, he's different.
Tom, let me give you just another couple of quotations from Judge Vaughn Walker's ruling the other day. Judge Walker, the traditional understanding of marriage represents, quote, nothing more than an artifact of a foregone notion that men and women fulfill different roles in civic life, close quote. That's an artifact.
Well, one might say that Judge Walker is an artifact of what goes on in academia and particularly in the law schools. But again, the question is, whose decision is that? Is that a judge is there to decide that the rest of us, that what we believe is just not worth thinking about? Or is he there to carry out the laws that have been passed by the duly elected representatives?
Tom, you know that during this trial, he had a long fact-finding phase in which one sociologist and expert after another came in to testify about the roles of genders, the state of marriage in the 21st century, and so forth. You just brush all that aside?
No, none of that is a substitute for we the people, which is what the Constitution's about. When I could give you an impressive list of people who have said absurd things. In fact, if you were to make a list of all the absurd things said by brilliant people, it would be longer than the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Ah.
All right. One more from Judge Walker here. Quote, the evidence shows conclusively that moral and religious views form the only basis for the belief that same-sex couples are different from opposite-sex couples, close quote.
Well, it may be conclusive to him, but again, the question is, whose decision is it? Obviously, it's not conclusive to other people, or else the proposition that he was ruling on would never have passed.
And been passed with the votes of 7 million Californians,
yes,
by the way. All right. So
wow.
Let me ask you, just step back from that a little bit and ask you this question. How did we go in the space of a couple of decades, maybe 3, but I think probably closer to 2, from an America in which the notion of same-sex marriage was literally unthinkable. That is to say, it was in nobody's head, so outlandish that it never occurred to anyone, to a sitting judge, federal judge, named to the federal bench, by the way, by George H.W. Bush,
Heaven help us.
coming out with an opinion like this. What happened to the legal regime, to the social to the mores.
Well,
Describe that arc.
this is why I say that Obama is really the culmination of a trend. He didn't do this by himself. That there was a notion out there, a set of notions really, about the country, about what was right, and about who should make what decisions. Those notions were out there, you know, before he ever became a public figure. But now that and I think what you saw was an erosion of the confidence in the country and the country's culture, its principles, and so forth. And all of this happened. And what is happening now is what was just an erosion, sort of almost uncoordinated and so on, to a deliberate attempt on his part to change the country in fundamental ways.
Now, you talked about Woodrow Wilson with a certain kind of rot setting in with Woodrow Wilson, the progressives, the sort of elitism. I, Woodrow Wilson, know far better than that non-entity James Madison who drafted the Constitution. Right, all right. But in more recent times, times that you and I can remember, we had Ronald Reagan and the sense that somehow the country was coming back. How do we go from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama? How do you go from a reassertion of what seems to be fundamental faith in the country to a Judge Vaughn Walker? What happened in the space of just 2 or 3 decades?
Well, I think it started immediately with Reagan's successor, George H.W. Bush, no doubt a decent man, an honorable man, but one who disdained what he called this vision thing. In other words, that an overarching sense of principles that you'd be fighting for. To me, I think one of the moments that sort of gave a clue was when, during one of the presidential debates, when Bush was looking at his watch.
Right.
I can't imagine Ronald Reagan, or any Democrat for that matter, looking at his watch during a, I mean, you know, Bush was, and I think that the first moment that you saw a glimpse of this was when Bush first took office, Bush 41, and started talking about a kinder and gentler America. That it's kinder and gentler to tax the taxpayers in order to make it easier on people who've not lived up to their responsibilities. You see that right now carried to extremes in this administration, where, you know, people who never took out a $700,000 loan in their lives now have to subsidize people who did take out a $700,000 mortgage loan and couldn't afford it.
So,
wow. Wow. You know what? I'm actually starting to see why. I'm starting to see the divide between the right and the left, the more I listen to intellectuals such as Dr. Sowell.
So it is the case that
I get it. I'm getting it. I'm getting it.
A Ronald Reagan in place fighting for American principles. And Ronald Reagans don't come along that often. Or even a Republican and temperamentally conservative president such as George H.W. Bush will come under such cultural and political pressures that the drift to the left, that will continue.
Yes, you know, well, what you generally have had in recent times is people moving to the left rapidly under Democrats and slowly under Republicans.
All right. Segment 3, Dismantling the Culture. From your book, Tom, Dismantling America, quote, "The great escape of our times is escape from personal responsibility."
Whoa.
Close quote. What do you mean?
Sheesh.
Well, I think that the idea of personal responsibility is more or less off the table. It's passé in many places. Again, going back to, say, the housing situation, that people took out mortgages that they couldn't afford, and that now people who didn't take out mortgages they couldn't afford are now expected to pay to bail them out. It's insane.
But you don't, they were duped by dishonest mortgage brokers. No?
Oh, there was enough dishonesty to go around. We needn't single out mortgage brokers. No, that's the narrative. The fact of the matter is that speculators took advantage. See, these things are put in these laws and policies are put into place, saying this is going to help the poor and the downtrodden. But the question is, who actually benefits from this? Speculators benefited from this more than any poor or any downtrodden. A speculator could come in, claim any income he wanted to claim in order to buy 3 or 4 houses. Nobody would verify the income. He would get them at teaser rates like 2% per year. And he didn't worry about that going up later because he was going to sell the house beforehand. And so a lot of that was in there. The other thing is that it's a very complicated financial situation. But the cold fact is, if the mortgages had continued to be paid, we wouldn't have had the mortgage crisis. So the fundamental reason for the crisis is that the mortgages weren't paid, and the fundamental reason they weren't paid is that they were made under conditions that made it unlikely that they would ever be repaid. And you knew that going in.
Right, right. Losing a sense of personal responsibility, you write, in Dismantling America places, quote, a whole society in jeopardy. How is that the case? How do you draw a line from the mortgage crisis to the dismantling of the entire country?
Well, I think if you don't have a sense of personal responsibility, and what you have is the government taking money from people who are personally responsible and giving it to people who are irresponsible, or in other cases corrupt, that's not a viable situation for the long term. You're going to have ever more people being ever more irresponsible.
That is true. That is true. And I think you guys said that that's not, you said it's not socialism. It's like socialism or something like that. Cronyism. I don't know. Feel free to correct me, but I've seen in the comments when I did Walter Williams broke it down for me. Broke it down for a brother, man. I swear. Thank you so much. So I see, shout out to YouTube, because what they do, they put this information right in front of us and allow us to just bow. And all we got to do is soak it up. Soak it up. And a lot of people who are here before us who didn't have this platform, but thank God they put that information online. People like me know the difference between capitalism and socialism. And sometimes when the government bails out certain organizations, companies and whatnot, yeah, it can go a little, it's not just as cut and dry as just giving people something for nothing, or using taxpayers' money to bail out a company. It goes a little further than that. But I have a better understanding of it. But it does seem like a lot of people were bailed out for being irresponsible, and unfortunately, or for just losing, or just not strategizing properly and doing what they need to do in order to keep their businesses, companies, loans, whatever it is, afloat. And other people were forced to take care of that on their behalf. And now we're here.
As is happening now. I mean, in the wake of the mortgage crisis, they've raised the limit that the Federal Housing Administration will insure from about 360,000 to 720-some-thousand. So they've doubled.
They doubled it?
The policy that got us into problems in the first place.
That's crazy.
Tom, on personal responsibility, and you and I have talked about this before. You spent part of your boyhood in Harlem.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, most of it.
All right. Tell me a little bit about the Harlem that you knew as a boy. Was it safe at night?
Yes, when I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would get up, get dressed, and go out to a corner newsstand where there was a little old man who was white selling newspapers in Harlem at midnight. Now today, he and I would both be taken in for mental observation. You know.
How were the schools in the Harlem of your boyhood?
Oh, they were among the best in the country.
Public schools.
Public schools. Oh, I only went to public schools. I have data on the actual test scores of kids in Harlem.
Wow.
They were almost identical with the kids in the Lower East Side, who are almost all white. And nobody was concerned about giving me school lunches and stuff like that. They didn't ask me whether my home was broken or not. They just told me what I was supposed to do, and they made damn sure I did it.
Do your homework, get your assignments in.
That's it.
Tom, what happened between the Harlem of your boyhood, which would be what, late 40s to the mid 50s or so?
40s. I went, my first school I attended in Harlem was 1939.
Oh, real? All right. So you grew up you were there during the Second World War.
Oh, yes.
All right. So the Harlem, take me from the Harlem of your boyhood,
So a minute ago,
personal responsibility, to the Harlem of the 70s and 80s.
Oh, there you got the teachers became social workers, social theorists. They became propagandists for all kinds of new fads. And I guess the test was whether they made the teachers feel like it was exciting and it made the students feel good about themselves. Of course, they end up not with no education that's worth talking about.
And what about the crime rates?
Oh my goodness, the crime rates were much lower. I gave a talk.
Much lower when you were a boy. But
yes.
So what do you attribute the rise in crime?
Oh, the rise in the idea that we have to look for the root causes of crime rather than put the bad guys in jail.
All right. So there's the dissolution of the sense of personal responsibility that the teacher is to teach, the child is to do his homework, criminals are to be picked up and put in jail.
Yes.
Now, Harlem today is pretty safe. It has enjoyed the increase in safety or the drop in crime rates associated with the rest of New York that began under Rudy Giuliani. The Harlem economy is pretty robust. And Harlem is now home to some 24 charter schools. So what I'm trying to do, Tom, is cheer you up. I'm trying to...
Well, I need it.
I'm trying to point to evidence of the possibility of renewal, of rebirth, and that to suggest
I never denied that there was possibility for renewal and rebirth. So I haven't said it. In fact, even in my book, I say, the one good thing is that nothing is inevitable until it happens. But I also point out that there were periods of improvement as the Roman Empire moved toward its last days.
Right. All right. Segment 4,
Wow.
Dismantling Self-Government. Again, Tom, from Dismantling America. Quote, nothing so epitomizes President Obama's contempt for American values and traditions as ramming 2 bills, the stimulus package and the health care bill, this would be, through Congress in his first year, each bill more than 1,000 pages long, too fast for either to be read, much less discussed, close quote. Stimulus package, the health care bill, actually, I looked this up, came to more than 2,000 pages.
Yes.
It's almost like President Barack Obama was Thomas Sowell's muse when it came to this. He dedicated an entire book to him. Dismantling America, starring President Barack Obama, written by Thomas Sowell.
Stimulus package, the health care bill, actually, I looked this up, came to more than 2,000 pages.
Yes.
On the other hand, the American people elected Barack Obama. They gave him big Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate. Why shouldn't Barack Obama and his Democratic allies enact whatever they want as they want?
Oh, whatever they want is one thing. As they want is something else. As they want means circumventing the whole political system of the country that's meant to safeguard, a self-governing country. If you never learn what kind of laws are being passed, then you lost a great deal of your ability to influence what happens to the people who rule. I mean, the thing that this whole business with rushing these bills through, it reminds me, the only thing I can find in parallel in history is the Norman conquerors who would publish their laws in England in French for an English-speaking nation.
Dismantling
Wow, now that's pretty sneaky. That's pretty sneaky. So we want to hurry up and get this passed. Let's hurry up. Who else got to sign it? We need 2 more signatures. Go get them signatures. Who else we got to go? Oh, we good? We good? Stamping it? Okay, go get the press so they can take a picture of us already having it done before anybody on the opposite side see it. That is kind of sneaky.
America once again. What are the Beltway politicians buying with all the hundreds of billions of dollars they are spending?
Wow.
They are buying what politicians are most interested in, power. Explain that notion.
There are things that the government is authorized to do under the Constitution and other things that they're not authorized to do. But by simply spending a vast amount of money, you acquire the right to do them. For example, you can fire the head of General Motors simply because you spent all that money rescuing General Motors. There are all kinds of programs that the federal government imposes on the states, which they have no authority to do, but they impose them because they make the receipt of federal money contingent on doing what they tell you in Washington.
Wow.
And so the powers that were set out in the Constitution and limited become expanded by this process.
Now, I mentioned that we've had some questions for you submitted from people who follow the show on Twitter and Facebook. Here's one from a fellow called Albert Fuchs on Facebook. And he points, I'll paraphrase because it's a little bit long here. Milton Friedman said a major reason for the growth of government is that special interests are concentrated, but the general interest is diffuse. And Tocqueville warned that American democracy would be in danger when the public learned it could use the ballot box to vote itself money.
Yes.
Now, both of these get at what you were talking about just a moment ago. But both of these are structural points. It has been the case since the Constitution was enacted that special interests are concentrated and the general interest is diffuse, or that politicians could in effect purchase votes.
Yes.
Why do we have the problem now? What has happened in recent
Very good
decades?
question. Because one of the constraints are the values of the public. And when the values of the public are constantly eroded in the schools and in the press, elsewhere, then these other tendencies can have a wider field of play.
Mm-hmm. So what's a good index for the values of the public? Would you say, for example, that it might be federal spending or federal debt, where for 2 centuries you get a fairly flat, slowly climbing line, goes up during the Civil War, comes back down, and then in the beginning about in the 70s, it just takes off.
Yes.
So it's not FDR, it's not the Great Deal, it's not the 30s, it's the 70s? Is that when do things begin to go catastrophically wrong?
I would say it was the Great Depression. Most people are unaware that prior to the 1930s, the federal government never intervened in the economy to get us out of a recession. The economy recovered on its own and kept going. But FDR really broke down a great deal of that sense of independence. I mean, there was a time, I think most Americans would have felt insulted to have it thought that they wanted somebody else to pay their medical bills. They don't feel so insulted anymore.
Mm.
No, it's expected. It's expected. And they're like, you know what? You guys presented it to us. We heard someone say free Medicare, free medical. And apparently they're doing it in other places like Canada. Yeah, if they can do it there, we want it now. There's no pride in getting out there and hustling and working for yours anymore, because I think we opt out of that whole hustle way of thinking by simply pointing out situations where we point out victims who need it most. What about them? What about the people who no longer have an income because they retired and their retirement got messed up because of some things that were done in the government, or they fought in the war and they were supposed to be taken care of by the VA, but the VA didn't fall through, so blah, blah, blah. We always like to point out like onesie, twosie type of situations to make sure that we can put everybody else in that bag. And that's that mentality again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the mentality
This
again.
is what I'm trying to get at. This on the one hand, you've got an elite that is effectively engaging in a slow motion hijacking of America. That's a crude way, but one way of putting it.
Shout out to Pete
But
Robertson.
On the other hand,
He's
you've
good.
got more and more Americans who either like the idea of being hijacked, are too worn out to fight it anymore. I'm trying to get your sense of the extent to which the public itself is dispirited.
Well, the ideas of the 60s, the idea that if you had a grievance, you didn't have to obey the law.
Historian Paul Ray of Hillsdale College, he grants, we did a shoot with Paul Ray, and he grants a great deal of what you've been saying here, Tom. But, now listen to Paul Ray. Quote, "The political moment in which we live is a moment of great, great hope," close quote. How so? Because by overreaching so dramatically, President Obama has roused the American people to reclaim their old liberties. The Obama administration, Paul Ray argues, this is a quotation, is, quote, "a gift to the friends of liberty," close quote.
I hope he is right and that I am wrong.
And you don't,
that's a
are you
way to say
encouraged
it.
by the Tea Party, by the polls that show that?
Oh, yes, yes. But there is such a thing as a point of no return. And I think then the real question is whether he can take us there. And that's why I think that the fall 2010 elections are, in my judgment, one of the most, if not the most important election we've ever held. Because if he doesn't get stopped in this fall's election, I don't know how he'll ever be stopped. For one thing, people talk about his falling in the polls. He's still in the 40s. If he can somehow make millions of illegal immigrants, legal and voters before 2012, he can get a second term. And I doubt if there's, I see that as a point of no return.
Wow.
So getting some substantial portion of the 12 million illegal immigrants in this country the vote.
Yes.
That would be a direction, step toward the point of no return.
Yes.
Domestically, what other, is Obamacare is reversible, or at least its ill effects can be contained. It all comes down to November 2010.
This year. If it's not stopped now, it won't be stopped.
All right. So November 2nd, 4th, I can't remember which is election day. You have one specific date in American history which you can name right now that you consider absolutely crucial.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like the great military battles, you know. Charles Markel at the Tours. Yes,
732. Yes. I actually looked that up just yesterday for a separate reason.
Or the siege of Vienna in 1532. You know, had those things gone the other way, it would be a totally different world today.
We're into segment 5, which I had in my notes titled "The Point of No Return." You mentioned in Dismantling America such a point in foreign policy. Let me quote you, Tom. Iran is advancing step by step toward nuclear weapons, while the Europeans wring their hands and the United Nations engages in leisurely discussion. When Osama bin Laden has nuclear weapons, the choice will be between knuckling under and watching American cities blasted off the face of the earth. That is the point of no return, and we are drifting toward it.
Yes.
Close quote. Nothing you've seen since you wrote that causes you to reconsider or mute your views?
Wow.
No. I was appalled earlier this year when I think it was Gates or someone else in the Pentagon leaked the fact that there were no contingency military plans for stopping Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And now recently, there have been some talk that there are now plans. Now, I have no idea whether that means that there really are plans or whether they see an election coming and they'd better create the impression that they have more plans. Because they've covered themselves very well because they have international conferences over Iran. They have resolutions in the UN. These are what I call elaborate ways of doing nothing.
Well, we've got, let me quote you.
Meetings about meetings about meetings about meetings. What are we getting done? That's a good one. Was we supposed to be getting stuff done? Because I thought we were supposed to be organized and getting people in the mindset that we're about to get something done. We're sparking the flame. We're getting people ready. We about to run forward and just really do something, shake things up. But y'all won't get anything done the entire daggone time. Wow, I am really getting a better idea of the government by simply checking out Thomas Sowell. What? Check that out, man. I'm about to be sharp. I'm about to be so daggone sharp. Y'all don't know, man. By me getting this information I'm getting, oh my God, I'm about to be sharp.
Michael Barone, the journalist, you know Michael Barone, this is just from a couple of days ago. Quote, Time magazine's Joe Klein and the American Interests' Walter Russell Mead suggested to me that the Obama administration is seriously considering a military strike against Iran. Now comes further evidence in an opinion article in the Washington Post by Stephen Simon and Ray Takei. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Simon worked in Bill Clinton's National Security Council, and Takei is described as a former advisor to the Obama administration. Their article takes seriously the possibility that the president will order such an attack. And your answer to that is, that could be nothing but cheap leaking.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
All right.
In fact, he doesn't have to do that. All he has to do is not interfere if the Israelis want to do it. I saw someplace where Saudi Arabia has indicated that the Israelis could fly over Saudi Arabia to get there. And it's ironic that they would have to go around Iraq and fly over Saudi Arabia because the American planes patrol Iraq and presumably would shoot down the Israeli planes on their way to Iran.
Let me ask you this. Do you consider it then the duty of the President of the United States to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear?
Absolutely.
That's clear to you.
Absolutely.
Unambiguous.
I don't know what earthly chance we have or the Western world has once Iran has those weapons. You know, it took two weapons.
What about this notion of deterrence? It worked during the Cold War.
The Russians did not want us to blast Moscow off the map. The Iranians have said themselves, going back to Ayatollah Khomeini, that their top priority is not Iran, but Allah. And so if they get into a war in which Iran is knocked out, but they then strike a blow for Allah, they're happy with that.
Wow. These dudes ready to risk it all and tear down any country possible if they can reach it, as long as they have the weapons of mass destruction to be able to do that. This is for Allah, and that's it. Wow, yeah, definitely keep the nukes out of their hands, bro. Are we still in the clear? Because this was posted 12 years ago. This was over 10 years ago, man. August 19, 2010. So, man, I hope they don't have any now. That's crazy. No, we looking at the end of times if they do.
And failing any serious sign that the United States would attack, would you say that it's the duty of the Prime Minister of Israel and his cabinet to order an attack?
Oh, absolutely. But think of how pathetic this is, that the fate of the United States of America would be in the hands of a country smaller than Lake Michigan.
One final time from Dismantling America. To follow Rome, one of the greatest civilizations of all time, as it degenerated and fractured, is especially painful in view of the parallels to what is happening in America in our own times. Close quote.
Yeah.
What are the parallels that are most striking to you?
The internal loss of confidence, that we're not prepared to stand up and defend ourselves. I mean, there are all kinds of small signs and large signs, but that we have to accommodate people who move here. You know, the old saying was that when in Rome, do as the Romans do. The new one is when in Rome, tell the Romans what to do. And we're going along with it.
Tom, let me close this out by getting your kind of a broad civilizational view here. 4th century. Rome's final century is a great power. Of course, it lingers on in Constantinople for another 1,000 years, but 4th century, we have St. Augustine watching from North Africa as his beloved Rome, where he studied, he's a great product of classical civilization, is sacked. And he responds by averting his gaze from this world and writing the city of God. He shifts his attentions to heaven. A few decades later, we have St. Benedict of Nursia up in northern Italy. And he's the founder of great monasteries, attempting to hoard, in a certain sense, what learning he can, and hoping that later there will be regrowth. And he adopts a motto which translates from the Latin, to pruned, it will grow again. So is Tom Sowell an Augustine who's insisting on underlying principles and a kind of eternal values, but actually believes that what he is observing is total collapse? Or is he a Benedict, hoping for, preparing for, doing what he can to initiate rebirth?
Well, I'm in an age where I couldn't play either of those roles.
You look pretty saintly to me, Tom.
You need new glasses, but no, I think it was really. But what I meant about the pathetic aspect of the aftermath of the collapse of Rome is, these heroic efforts, which ultimately paid off, many centuries later. But there were centuries to live through. Imagine,
the Dark Ages were dark.
Yes, imagine living in the midst of ruins that you don't even have the knowledge to repair, much less to build.
Oh, that's what you mean in the passage when you talk about the pathetic attempt to rebuild among the ruins.
Yes.
The sense that there was a civilization here.
And it was all around you. And I think this is part of the reason that the Europe of that era is thought of as a backward-looking civilization. They had good reason to look backwards because the people before them had achieved far more than they were capable of achieving or even sustaining.
So your fear is that 2 decades from now, Americans will be looking back at, even at the 1950s, a time of growth and American self-confidence and standing up to the Soviets in the Cold War, assuming a large role in the world. That'll be gone, and we'll have the feeling that we're pygmies by comparison with... There's something of this in Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation.
Yes.
There's a kind of nostalgia, a feeling that those who came just before us were bigger people somehow.
They were.
They were.
Yes.
All right. Last question. If you could offer one sentence of counsel to the President of the United States, what would you say, Tom?
Resign.
Whoa! No, I can't end the program on
Mic
that.
drop.
If you could offer one sentence of
drop.
counsel to some 20-year-old kid who's watching this webcast. And by the way, when we put up a notice that you're going to appear on Twitter or Face, you are a rock star to college kids. I want you to know that. So there's hope. You're reaching people. So one sentence of advice to some sophomore or junior who's watching this today and thinks to himself, gee, Dr. Sowell just told me the America in which I'm going to grow up will be a shrunken place.
No. It's not over till it's over, as Yogi Berra said. And I would say to this young person, if we, through some miracle, get through this, please take to heart the lesson of what happens when you vote on the basis of rhetoric and symbolism and instead of using your mind. It doesn't matter how smart you are unless you stop and think.
Wow.
Dr.
like
Thomas
that.
Sowell, the author of Dismantling America, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete Robinson. I appreciate it, bro. And thank you, Tom Sowell, for this. That was awesome. It's not over till it's over. All right. All right. These conversations I really enjoy. Hopefully you are here still with me and you enjoyed it as well. If there's a way that I can do this to make it better for you, any suggestions you have, please make sure you put those in the comments below. And if you have yet to hit that subscribe button, please make sure you do so on your way out the door. Once again, guys, I am Van. Now we are all the LFR family, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video, hopefully inside the Patreon as well. And we got a whole lot of music reactions going up over on the LFR Family Plus channel. Also, if you want to put in a suggestion via donation, please go to www.lfrfamily.com. That will be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Love y'all.